Greetings friends, and welcome to my game room. I'm David McCord, and I am a collector and game player, game designer, game maker, and game historian, if you will. Today I'd like to tell you about a game that's called AlQuerques. AlQuerques has been around for many centuries. Its descendants, you might say, are still played today. You might have heard of the game called checkers, also called drafts. In the 10th century, the game called AlQuerque was mentioned by Abu al-Faraj in a 24-volume work that he did called the Book of Songs. Because it was referred to in poetry, it kind of can be assumed that it was well known, that people understood the game. Of course, he didn't relate the actual rules to the game at that time, but it was very, very popular. And with the spread of Islam, the game went with the Moors as they went to Spain, and that's where it really got codified, was when they went to Spain in the 13th century. At that time, the game was being played in the royal court. It was King Alfonso X of Castile that ordered a book written in 1283, and that book was called De Libro de los Juegos, the Book of Games. And he codified a lot of different games that were popular at the time, chess, backgammon, mills, a few others, and ElQurkat was one of those. Now later the game name ElQurkat was Frenchified and changed just slightly to AlQuerques, and that's the way it's mostly known nowadays. Let's take a quick look at how the game is played, and I'll be right back with a little more information. The board is an array of 25 points connected by a specific pattern of lines, and each player has 12 pegs of a distinct color. As in most two-player abstract games, the players decide who will go first, then take turns. There are two choices available. They can move one of their pegs to an adjacent point on the board following the lines. Depending on the starting position of the turn, they might have anywhere from 3 to 8 possible move directions. The other choice is to jump a peg over an opponent's peg, landing on a vacant point on the other side. When this is done, the jumped piece is removed, just like checkers. Like a move, the jump has to follow the lines on the board. Also like checkers, a player can continue to jump pieces in a chain. However, unlike checkers, the pieces are removed as they are jumped. And unlike checkers, pieces can be moved or jumped in any direction as long as the lines are followed. So the game begins with the pegs in the arrangement shown here, with a center space empty. For the first player, there are 4 possible moves available. Assuming that the player with the white pegs goes first, here's one of those potential moves. Now the player with the black pegs can move that piece, or jump that piece. Yes, jumping is optional. Many strategies are possible, which makes the game fun and interesting. Let's just play through a series of moves here to give you an idea of how that game could unfold. The objective is to eventually capture all of your opponent's pieces, or to block your opponent's pegs so they cannot move. It's possible to get to a point where both players have the same number of pegs left and there's no way for either player to win. If that happens, the game is declared a draw. Now this layout for the board was later adapted to different variations over the years. The boards got larger. They changed, instead of a bunch of connected points, to squares. Eventually it was a checkerboard, squares, and all the moves were diagonal, and they eliminated a lot of the moves in there. But it was essentially the same jump and capture game. Now, a variation that was played in Morocco called AlQuerque introduced that the pieces could not move backwards unless they had landed on the farthest row. That might sound a little bit familiar. When they landed on the far row, they were either promoted to what either called mullah or the sultan, depending on which accounts that you read. And once they landed on that far row, then they could move in any direction. What's interesting is that the promotion to mullah was very temporary. If the turn was started on that last row or the furthest row, or if that furthest row was landed upon during the middle of a chain jump, then they were promoted instantly to mullah or sultan, and they could move backwards. But once they left the back row, that promotion went away and they had to go back to the back row again in order to gain those powers. One other fascinating little power that they had was called the long jump. Take a look at this.
In this illustration, the white mullah can jump over the opposing black piece at any distance, as long as the lines on the board are followed, and the jumping piece lands on a space directly beyond the target. This, coupled with chain jumps, can clear the board in a hurry.
Long jump is common in a lot of different variations of checkers. International checkers and Polish checkers both use a long jump. Also, there's a unique variation called Nam Dinh from Vietnam, which is laid out the same way on the board, except that the center piece in each side here is actually a king. The king's main power in that case is that it can't be captured. Otherwise, it's just like any other piece, but of course that gives it a heck of a lot of power. That's an interesting variation on the game. So I hope you enjoyed this introduction to AlQuerques. It's a fascinating little game, and we publish this version here through the Peg Pastimes series by NewVenture Games. It's being distributed by Red Hen Toys, and so we invite you to check that out. If you enjoy this information and would like to hear more, by all means subscribe to the YouTube channel, and we will be presenting more in the future. As I always say, you should play every day.